Today I want to go back to the discussion of trusts. Why? Well, many, including thelegacy.info, www.the-legacy.info, on that DVD series and on their website, they show you that much of what we have for government in this country is a trust. Even all of the language, and we've talked about that in the first 4 parts of the series. And of course, we've got all this hubbub going on up in Wisconsin having to do with collective bargaining. I thought we'd just go ahead and pick up in our Divine, Breen, Frederickson, Williams, America Past and Present textbook, kind of a college-level history book, certainly too big and thick for high school use. But somebody going to university might have to buy this book. They probably would never touch even a portion of it. I've read it all. Well over 1,000 pages, but they probably wouldn't touch all of this in a course, in school. That they don't do that, They just make you buy the books. But this part continues with where we're looking at on page 669, the square deal. We're talking about the New Deal, busting the trusts, Roosevelt's campaign, 1907, Morgan, U.S. Steel, so on and so forth, Tennessee Coal and Iron Company, all these things we've discussed in previous broadcasts. We talked about Edward H. Harriman, James Hill, J.P. Morgan, Kuhn Loeb and Company, Rockefeller interests, all this, Sherman Antitrust Act, etc. A square deal in the coal fields. Let's talk about the unions. A few months after announcing the Northern security suit, Roosevelt, that would be the first one, not the second one, intervened in a major labor dispute involving the anthracite coal miners of northeastern Pennsylvania. Of course, we remember Gustavus Meyer's wonderful book, The History of the Great American Fortunes, where we discover that these railroad magnates, the captains of finance and industry, were less interested in the railroads than they were in gaining control of all of this land. And they were using public monies to finance and buy all of this stuff, and land grants, enormous land grants. They made billions and billions at a time when $100 was really something. Pick it up right there, right after this. Stay tuned. So on this page 669 of our Republican Roosevelt, from Roosevelt to Wilson chapter, their national politics in the age of progressivism, the progressives, right? There's a cartoon here, 1904 cartoon, the caption reads, depicts Theodore Roosevelt as, quote, Jack the Giant Killer, battling the Wall Street Titans. And then it continues, this is actually Roosevelt dissolved relatively few trusts. It looks good. Looks good in the New York Slime or the Washington Postal, but it's really not accurate. All right? So let's go into it a little bit more. The square deal in the coal fields again. A few months after announcing the Northern security suit, Roosevelt, what is with this intergenerational control of our country anyway? And now we've got Rand Paul? Wow. It goes all across both aisles, doesn't it? Roosevelt intervened in a major labor dispute involving the anthracite coal miners of northeastern Pennsylvania. Led by John Mitchell, a moderate labor leader, the United Mine Workers demanded wage increases, an 8-hour workday, and company recognition of the union. The coal companies refused, and in May of 1902, 140,000 miners walked off the job, and the mines were closed. Of course, you only have to look at an anthracite mine once in your life to understand why these guys had a legitimate bitch. But I wonder whether union work is the right way to go. Obviously and intentionally, the union is the one that's really going to profit, not the guy down in the dirt. As the months passed and the strike continued, coal prices rose. With winter coming on, schools, hospitals, and factories ran short of coal. Public opinion turned against the companies. Morgan and other industrial leaders privately urged them to settle, but George F. Bayer, head of one of the largest companies, refused, quote, the rights and interests of the laboring man, Bayer said, will be protected and cared for not by labor agitation, but by the Christian men to whom God in His infinite wisdom has given the control of the property interests of this country. Now, I can tell you that in this book there are very few truths and profound statements, but Few are more true and profound than that. I'll give it to you again. The rights and the interests of the laboring man will be protected and cared for, not by the labor agitators, but by the Christian men to whom God in His infinite wisdom has given the control of the property interests of this country. Let's go back to one of the founding documents. We are just going to skip the preamble and go right to this. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Of course, that's the Declaration. That all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable or unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And of course, in the Constitution, we remove the pursuit of happiness, go right to property. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And it continues. What are we talking about here? We need to recognize that our rights come not from governments, come not from the labor unions or the progressives. No, indeed. They come from the Creator. When we fail to understand how important property, what an important place property holds in our entire system, we lose it all, as we have today. In the chat room, in the news basket, no matter where you look, there's a continuous assault on property. And why wouldn't there be? Maybe you have to ask yourself, how are you doing? Do a little checkup from the neck up. Are you a communist? Are you a card-carrying communist? Are you? The very first plank in the Communist Manifesto, the abolition of private property. How are you doing on that one? Are you willing to take property from your neighbor? His private property rights, are you willing to take them from him and move those little chess pieces onto your board? How about the second one? A heavy progressive income tax. You paying that heavy progressive income tax? Maybe you support communism. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. You don't like this intergenerational accumulation of wealth, the trust? We talked about that. Rothschild, the lawyer on U.S. soil. He's really good at that. He's really good at this intergenerational accumulation of wealth and making sure that other people, through the use of trusts, are able to preserve what they have. Don't like that? Maybe you're a communist. Confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. Rebels. Rebellion. It's not the same as a revolution. You can have a revolution without going to rebellion. Central banking. Use those Federal Reserve notes. Wow. Government control of education. You like that? Government control of education. We'll have the National Education Association. We'll go ahead and have the unions involved in the schools. Wow, maybe we're just all a bunch of card-carrying communists. Maybe this is a communist nation. Maybe we have been overthrown. Let's continue with the article. Again, the rights and the interests of the laboring man will be protected and cared for not by the labor agitators, but by the Christian men to whom God in His infinite wisdom has given the control of property interests of this country. Now, Roosevelt was furious at this, complaining of the company's arrogance. He invited both sides of the dispute to an October 1902 conference at the White House. There, Mitchell took a moderate tone and offered to submit the issues to arbitration, but the companies again refused to budge. Roosevelt ordered the Army to prepare to seize the mines and then leaked word of his intent to Wall Street leaders. And all across America, mines are being sealed up because the little bats have got white noses. Maybe if they keep their noses out of the cocaine jar, they wouldn't have white noses, but that's the way bats are, you know, crap crazy that they are. Continuing. More and more, Roosevelt saw the federal government as an honest and an impartial broker between powerful elements in society. Rather than leaning toward labor, he pursued a middle way. It's the third way. Tony Blair. Common purpose. public-private partnerships. Rather than leaning towards labor, he's a progressive, he pursued a middle way to curb corporate or labor abuses, abolish privilege, enlarge individual opportunity. Often he backed reforms in part to head off more radical measures. Of course, this is the home of philosophical radicalism, where freedom is popular, and we don't shy away from radical thinking. Let's continue. Now, into the Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, the article under trust we began the other day. The term trust has been so variously defined that its connotations remain unprecise. And of course, all of these great railroads and things like that were set up, the mining interests conjoined with the railroad interests, conjoined with the postal routes and ways, combined with the coastal trade, combined with the Orient trade, all of these things together. It was Rockefeller that first really perfected this idea of trust as regards to corporations. The term trust has been so variously defined that its connotations remain unprecise. So if we're going to be the replacement set, if we're going to be the solution, rather than just part of the problem, perhaps it'll be worth our time to find out more about trust, and we will right after this word from our sponsor.